Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I have a double product review. So I have a wristwatch and a strap to review from two different companies. Now I'd like to point out at the very beginning of this video that both of these products were sent to me free of charge. Now I'd like to point out also, as I've pointed out in my previous reviews, that doesn't change my bias towards these watches. I review these watches from a really unbiased perspective, and if I notice any faults with these watches and this strap, I will point them out. And that's something which I believe in on this channel, because I feel that if I would say anything else, I would be deceiving my viewers, which is inherently wrong and dishonest. So this is a completely impartial review of these two products. Now, I shall begin with the Spinnaker Tavolara, because I think it's a very exciting product, and a very interesting one as well. Now, just to put this into perspective and to give a better background, I reviewed the Spinnaker Hass, which is their other vintage-styled watch in the line, which is this watch here. And as you can see, it's substantially larger. And this watch was altogether a very, very good package. And I've kept the watch for a few weeks now and worn it regularly to get a better feel for the pros and cons of this watch, to really understand what can be adjusted, what should be changed, and what's just right. And my main criticism before, one of my few criticisms actually, was the engraved logo on the side of the watch. I personally don't like the look of engraved logos on the sides of watches. It's just the way I feel about things. I personally think it detracts from the look of the watch, despite it still being a very handsome timepiece. But things that I did like were, for example, I liked the way the bezel was made. I liked the design of, for example, the strap, which was this waterproof leather strap. I equally like the general design of the watch. And they've taken various things that were said by myself and other people to heart, I think, and really considered them, rather. So with this new Tavolara, which is named after a Sardinian island, which I think suits this watch very well, they haven't, for example, engraved the name onto the side of the watch, and they've remade that waterproof leather strap, which are things which I really appreciate and shows real attention to detail and care from the manufacturer, which is exactly what you want in a watch that you want to purchase. Now, the price of this watch, just to better give perspective as to what the watch is offering for the price, is $390. However, at the moment it's $312, and I will include a 5% discount code, which I've also been given to offer you as well. But for that you get this strap, this NATO strap, which is very high quality. It's comparable. I still like my the straps that I've bought recently post review from Blue Shark straps, but I think this is still a very, very good quality strap with a signed buckle, along with the strap which I personally like the most, which is this waterproof leather strap, which is perforated, as you can see, for better breathability. And in this particular setup of the watch, this particular version, the strap is this sort of cloud blue with this green stitching, which I think really is very individual and shows that they're trying to do something different as opposed to just a simple black strap. Now, the dial of this watch is at first quite busy, but if you look at it a bit further, it becomes much more simple. So you have the minute hand in green, which is something I appreciate because it makes it more legible, in green with an arrow point to the simple straight hand that is the hour hand, and then you have a second hand in a contrasting colour, in this case red, with a little loom pip on it, which the loom on this watch is actually very, very good and something that's been improved since the Hass. Now, again, the watch has these loom pips around. It also has loom in the Spinnaker logo at 12 o'clock. This watch has also acquired a date at 3 o'clock, which is, of course, a standard place to put the date, but still, it's appreciated, whereas when the Hass didn't have this. Equally, the dial is this lovely deep blue, and something which I love about this watch is that deep blue dial. Now, this watch is also available with a green sort of khaki dial, or a black dial, and the hands change as well. The other two have orange minute hands, for example. This one is the only one to have the green one, which I personally like a lot, but I know won't appeal to everyone. Equally, the watch has these two crowns. That's something to bear in mind with this watch, that it does have the extra feature of an internal bezel. So as you can see, when I turn this upper crown, it is actually a bezel. Now it's bidirectional, but that doesn't matter because having worn it, the crown offers sufficient resistance to be pretty much impervious to any knocks or anything that happens to happen on my example, which is something which I like, because not being a screw down crown here means that it does have to have a certain resistance not to turn, and that's something that this does have. So as you can see, the bezel is graduated all around and turns bidirectionally and very smoothly. The crown at the bottom with this blue ring through it to demonstrate which crown is which unscrews. So it unscrews its first position, it winds, because there is in fact a manual winding function on this watch. It pops out once and becomes the date changing function, and then you pop it out another time and it then adjusts the time. Now this watch isn't hacking, it's only hand winding, like the Hass, which is again something which I would have appreciated, but for the price it's pretty good, considering the Miyota movement inside this has been modified. And that's something to point out. This has a Japanese Miyota movement, but it has been modified by Spinnaker, and they've added a blued rotor, a blued steel rotor, which is something, again, I like. So another touch which I think I like a lot about this watch is that Spinnaker is now engraved into the rotor rather than being simply written on the back of the crystal, which is something which was the case on the Hass, which was never I never particularly liked, but now it's that they have changed that. And they've made an effort to blue the rotor, which is something which a lot of companies don't do, and it bothers me really, because one sees the movement, but it's completely undecorated without even a modified rotor. So as you can see, the back of the case is actually very carefully designed, so it feels like one piece, because the edges are right on the rim, meaning it makes for a very comfortable wear. The sizing has changed as well since the Hass. So, for example, the depth, whereas the Hass was 16 mils deep, which is a very deep watch from the top of its domed crystal, this watch has been reduced in thickness to 13, which may still seem very thick, but that's courtesy of this enormous crystal. It's a box crystal which sits extremely proud of the rest of the case. Now, some people will find this too much and will fear about it cracking on things, but so far, because of those beveled edges, I haven't had any problems, though I will tell you in future if I do. Equally, the lug-to-lug distance is 46 millimeters, and making it much more comfortable than the 50 millimeters of the Hass on a smaller wrist. They also drop down quite substantially to wrap around the wrist comfortably. The brushing on the sides of the case goes in several directions. It goes down on the very edges, but then it travels around the case on these rims down here, and again on the external bezel, as you can see, just here, which is something, again, which I like, having contrasting finishes, but it still comes back to that tool look, which these watches did have in the past. Because, of course, the history of the internal bezel comes with the supercompressor cases, which looked to a slightly more dressy style of dive watches, where as the pressure increased, the crowns would actually increase their water resistance. And now I do know that this crown is operable underwater, which is something which again is appreciated when in a lot of watches, if you turn the crown underwater, you flood the watch and ruin it. Now, the Spinnaker logo is actually applied, and as are the numerals. They have little narrow rims, which are metal and don't protrude from the dial quite as much as those of the Hass, which protruded extremely deeply. So this gives a much more restrained look, which is something which I appreciate on a day-to-day basis, where the Hass was always a little bit much for the office. So the dial also indicates that it's water resistant to 100 meters, and I have been told by Spinnaker that it'll actually do 200 in some cases. So I believe that's actually an underrating of the depth rating, but nonetheless, I'd be very, very comfortable diving with this watch on the basis that I've done a lot of swimming with this watch and haven't had any issues. Now, again, that strap is waterproof, so you can swim with the strap, but I would recommend for just the fact that you can protect your watch from being lost as a result of a spring bar failing, which does happen, although it's extremely rare. I would advise NATO straps for diving, which of course this watch is provided with. So the case is 316L stainless steel, meaning that it's easily refinishable, but also has a resistance to corrosion and to bumps and scratches, which is again something I like. Now the lugs themselves are something to be noted in this watch because they're very narrow and possibly even dainty looking, but they're very resistant. They're very strong, and I've noticed that is something I like. That said, though, I do worry at times about these lugs getting deformed over time and getting bent or broken when I have no strap on it. For example, when I'm changing a strap, when these are just freestanding, I do worry about them a little bit. So that is something to bear in mind. And again, that crystal, if you are going to be using this watch in very, very testing circumstances where it might bump on things, that crystal may be an issue for you. So that's another criticism, a sort of a semi-criticism, I suppose, because I personally love the crystal, but I know that it won't be for everyone. Now, on the wrist, this watch fits very nicely because it's a 42mm case, 41 or 42, I'd say. It feels like a 40mm, if I'm honest. So it does wear small. So if you like large watches, this isn't necessarily for you. I would suggest the Haas from Spinnaker for that. But what I like about the way this watch fits is that, as you can see, the crowns are quite small, so they don't really protrude or dig in, which is something which I usually fear with super compressor style crowns. Again, those lugs do drop down quite substantially, so they fit around the wrist despite being slightly higher. They start very high above the rest of the case back. But as you can see, that crystal does protrude enormously. I think does give an extremely vintage sort of vibe to this watch, and it sort of makes a crossover between the 50s super compressors and the 1970s hands and sort of bright colours. But generally, it's a simple case design that works very, very well, and I think one which I would definitely, well, I know this is definitely a watch which I would buy for the price, which is more than can be said for a lot of watches which I see regularly, and a lot of watches which cost more. Now, the one thing is about this watch is that I appreciate the fact that they've dropped the price since the Haas. Whereas the Haas sat just under $500, this watch now sits at about $390 usually, but now $312 plus the discount code. But at the moment, during this 2-week period, it's less. But even at $390, I think for the features it offers, it's much better value than the Haas was. The Haas is still in production. You can still buy them if you think that's what you want. And it's a very nice watch, I will say. But in terms of value for money, I think this really does take the biscuit. Now, the discount code which I offer, which brings the price down from the pre-order $311.99, so $312. For that 5% off is AS5, all capital. So it's on the screen now. And that should give you an extra 5% off if you would like to purchase this watch. And I personally think this is a very, very nice watch for the price, and corrects a lot of the issues, in fact, all the issues, in my opinion, that I pointed out about the Spinnaker Haas, and gives a very interesting watch which you won't see another of. These won't be sold, I imagine, in large quantities. These are going to be few and far between, and offer a certain sort of funky touch to a watch which would usually, in this super compressor style, be very conservative. So if you like the super compressor style, but want something that's slightly different, then this is probably the watch for you. Now, this second product, which I have to review today, is a minimalist wear Perlon Strap. Now, I receive a number of straps regularly for review, and a lot of them don't come up to the standards which I'd like to share with you on my channel. Now, I'd like to point out that the vast majority of those straps I simply deem as being too flimsy, or not high enough quality, or not good enough value to show on my channel, and just don't feel that it would be correct to show them to you. I think this strap, though, does hit the spot. Now I'll start with the buckle. Now a lot of Perlons have a certain weakness, which is their buckle, because they tend to have these single piece buckles with a keeper at the back that's built in, and they tend to make them out of fairly cheap materials, and they tend to be very flimsy and not very durable. Now this isn't the case with this strap. This is a PVD finished buckle with, as you can see, black and white engraved into the base of the base of the buckle here. It equally has that filled in with white, meaning that you keep that monochromatic look, which goes for the whole strap. Now, the beauty, I think, of a black and white strap, and one doesn't see very many people wearing these, is that it will emphasize a watch dial which is very bright, but blend in with a watch dial which isn't. Meaning that depending on what look you want, it'll be able to suit the watch very well, and there are very few watches which won't go with a black and white strap. Now again, Perlon straps are things which I haven't mentioned on the channel very much, and I think they deserve a good look, and this one is a good example. They're much narrower and thinner than NATO strap, for example. They're slightly less robust. They're not as resilient as a NATO strap. Despite being single piece straps, they slip through both spring bars of your watch, and I mean that if you break a spring bar, the watch will still remain attached to your wrist. Now, I've always found Perlons to be the dressier younger brother, if you will, of a NATO or a Zulu, because they're much thinner, as you can see, so they will fit between the lugs and the case of pretty much any watch, even if it has hooded lugs. These should fit. Because they're much thinner than NATO's, whereas NATO's tend to catch a bit. Equally, they have a certain variability and a versatility which one doesn't see on NATO, because as you can see, one pushes the buckle, the tang of the buckle, through the strap, as opposed to having holes, meaning that you can really size it however you want it. Now, that brings me on to what I think is very high quality about this strap, is that on a lot of Zulus, I noticed that if you push the tang through, it makes a permanent hole. It damages the strap itself, meaning that you get these large holes which slowly build over time. Now, I've been wearing this for a few days now, and I've noticed nothing of the sort. The tang will come out, and the threads will realign beautifully to return to their original pattern, which is something which I, again, appreciate enormously. Now, there's no point really me showing you a strap without demonstrating it on watch, so I thought this Telgray TCD01 would be the perfect watch to demonstrate this strap on. Now, again, the gap between the case and the spring bars on this watch is very narrow, but as you can see, the strap fits nicely, whereas I've had problems with NATO's on this watch, with thicker NATO's, such as the Alpha Sharks, which, don't get me wrong, are very high quality, but simply are too thick for some watch configurations. So as you can see, it suits the monochromatic look of the watch quite well, and also that red hand stands out all the more because it's on a monochromatic black and white background. Now, equally, I suppose in this case it's quite lucky the PVD bezel of this watch and the buckle look excellent together, but I really wanted to show you this on this watch just to demonstrate how thin the strap actually is, if I can get it into focus for you. There we are. There we are. So as you can see, it simply slips through without really causing the lump which one notices under one's wrist, which raises a strap on a watch on a NATO substantially several millimeters higher, whereas this won't have that effect, which is again something I like, and the reason why I would actually see these as fitting a dress watch as much as a sports watch, as opposed to a NATO strap, which I think doesn't really suit a dress watch very well. Now, if I just put this onto my wrist, one notices that this actually fits around the wrist much better as well than a NATO, and these tend to be more compliant when new, and that's something I've definitely noticed with this strap, being a high quality strap. Now, as you can see, if I shall raise the camera slightly for you, here we are, and that, as you can see now, the watch actually hasn't raised at all off the wrist, and that's something I appreciate about Perlon straps as opposed to NATO's and so on. So these are something to consider. I will include the link to this strap in the description. But I really must emphasize about this video, and I have emphasized, but I don't want any misconceptions. I only review products which I believe are high enough quality for my viewers, because really it's important to me that I'm giving honest reviews on the basis that I wouldn't want to be fed rubbish by a YouTube channel if it was in fact rubbish and they were simply being paid, whereas that really isn't the case here. So I hope you enjoyed this video and the products in it. I have included the discount codes and the links to the two websites for these watches in the description down below. This watch and this strap even down in the description below. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then do please like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more content on this channel, and do have a look at my other videos. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.